to you, Mr. Mayor, whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you very much. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the council meeting on May 30th, 2022. Beginning March 1st, 2022, the City of Kitchener is aligned with provincial changes to COVID-19 restrictions, and City Hall is now open for in-person services, but appointments are still being encouraged. The city remains committed to the safety of our patrons and staff and continues to facilitate electronic meeting participation for members of the public. Those people interested in participating in future meetings can register to participate electronically by completing the online delegation registration form at www.kitchener.ca/delegation or via email at delegation@kitchener.ca. For those who are interested in accessing the meeting live stream video, it's available at www.kitchener.ca/watchnow. Any written submissions that have been received prior to tonight's meeting have been forwarded to members of council and will form part of the public record of this evening's meeting. I'd now like to begin, as we normally do, by acknowledging that this evening we're gathering on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. I would now like to invite everyone to stand as they're able for the singing of our national anthem and ask members of council to turn off their screens so we don't have any awkward video shots. Thank you.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command.
Apologies to everyone for the technical difficulties that we seem to have with the anthem this evening. We'll have to follow up and check on what the problem was. I will acknowledge that we're certainly pleased to have KW Glee, who originally sang that version of the anthem for us for the Canada Day celebration, the virtual one, on July 1st, 2020. And I'll note that on YouTube that that version has almost had 180,000 views so far and is being used far and wide. So in fact, KW Glee just had their first show at the Conrad Center for the first time since 2019, about a week ago, and sold out 5 performances. Had the opportunity to join them for one of them, and it was absolutely outstanding. So thank you to KW Glee. We'll move on to item number 2 on motion by Councillor Kelly Galloway Seelock. The minutes of the regular meeting held May the 9th as mailed to the mayor and councillors was accepted. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Sorry, just not seeing any. So we'll move on to the communications referred to file. Note the flag request from the KW Croatian Club. And now we'll move on to presentations. 5.1, the Ontario Good Roads Association, and presentation by Scott Butler, the Executive Director of the Ontario Good Roads Association, of the Lane Robinson Volunteer of the Year Award to Mara Engel, our Supervisor of Operations on Roads, who was the recipient this year. And I'll turn it over to you, Scott. And welcome, Mara and Rosalind. You have to unmute, Scott. You can't unmute. Madam Clerk, do you know what? It seems our folks can't unmute.
Now we go.
Okay, welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's my distinct pleasure to join you and members of council this evening to recognize Mara Engel. My name is Scott Butler, as the mayor said. I'm the executive director at Good Roads. We have been around since 1894 advocating for better roads and infrastructure for municipalities across Ontario. And every year we train about 3,000 municipal employees in everything from contract law to pothole filling and everything in between. We rely on the expertise and insights of municipal staff such as Mara, who volunteer their time and energy to train that next generation of municipal leaders. At a time when the entire municipal sector was looking to return to a more normal footing, Mara was instrumental in stepping up, and that's the reason why I'm here today. Whether it was instructing a course or helping us pull together some of the first in-person training that happened way back, seems like years and years ago, but it was only last September, Mara was a calm and reassuring presence for everyone involved. She was nominated by a former president of Good Roads and a longtime instructor from the County of Wellington, Paul Johnson, who commended her for her dedication and her hard work. The same holds true for my staff, who acknowledged, in particular, her deep understanding and expertise on issues such as the impact that climate change is imposing on municipal infrastructure. At a time when leadership in the municipal sector is vitally important, if the city of Kitchener could somehow clone 443 Maras and share them across the province with all the other municipalities, I think we'd be richer for the experience. So please join me in congratulating Mara Engel, the winner of the 2022 Volunteer of the Year Award, on this well-deserved recognition. Bravo, Mara.
Thank you, Scott.
Congratulations, Mara. That's a beautiful award. And I think Rosalind would like to say a few words as well. Rosalind, over to you.
Okay, I'm struggling with the unmute button. Yes, today, I'm very happy to share with the news that Mara has been recognized by Good Roads. Just to give you a recap of Mara's involvement with us at the City of Kitchener, Mara joined us in 2017 as our operations technologist, supporting both the roads and traffic and parks and cemeteries divisions. And in her time as our operations technologist, Mara has used her drive to elevate our teams, working with TIS to use the most up-to-date technology to lessen the manual burden of pothole, sidewalk, and winter patrol inspections. She's helped position Kitchener to best respond to the 2018 legislative changes related to winter maintenance of bike lanes and sidewalks that you're all aware of. She's also helping us get ready for the pending legislative changes related to managing our waste soils that are generated by our maintenance activities. And she's also commissioned the snow storage and disposal facility into operation. Mara has also been, or was, a key contact, city contact, empathetically helping to set up a better tent city at the SSDF property, as well as helping to relocate the ABTC to their current location. Most recently, on another leg of her journey, her learning journey here at the city, Mara earned the supervisory role for our snow loading crews this past winter. While the rest of the city was sleeping, Mara and her team were hard at work getting the city ready for morning rush hour. In the summer months, in addition to supervising a number of the frontline staff, Mara will be managing the city's new waste transfer facility here at the COFF. And throughout her tenure, as Scott Butler alluded, Mara has developed and delivered snow school training to most of our frontline operators in roads and traffic and parks and cemeteries. Keeping up to date with the legislated requirements for winter maintenance, networking within the operations community, Mara gained notoriety amongst her peers and has been asked to deliver training throughout the region and as well as for good roads on a provincial level. Mara has a keen sense for sharing her knowledge and volunteers when any opportunity presents. So it was really great to see that her efforts were recognized on the provincial stage in April at the Good Roads Conference in Toronto, where she was presented with the 2021 Elaine Robinson Volunteer of the Year Award by Good Roads. So I just wanted to share the exciting news, have Scott here to represent the award and share this accomplishment with you and with the City of Kitchener as a whole. So thank you very much. And congratulations, Mara, on an award well deserved.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mara. Did you want to say anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I do enough talking when I'm teaching for Good Roads, so I'm good.
Well, certainly on behalf of council, want to congratulate you and thank you for all your good work on behalf of the organization, but particular your efforts over the past couple of years with supporting the work that council and the city were trying to support with a better tent city. Having that kind of leadership was important as we look to serve some of our most vulnerable residents in the community. So thank you for your leadership on that.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Rosalind. Thanks, Mara.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, then we'll move into delegations. And we do have a few delegations. I do want to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. Delegations have 5 minutes to make their presentation. You'll be made a panelist prior to your name being called. Once you've joined the meeting as a panelist, you'll have access to your microphones and camera. Please leave your video camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you're called upon to speak. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it'll result in immediate removal from the meeting: interrupting the mayor or council, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about the mayor or council, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and/or hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations: please do not take offense if following your presentation there's no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. And with that, we'll move on to item 6.1, the 2022 development charges bylaw passage. And we have two delegations on that. The first one is Natalia Kalbas and Daniel Tivoli from Hemson Consulting to answer any questions from council. Are there any questions from council on this issue? Councillor Singh. You're muted, Councillor Singh. Okay, let's try this. Yeah,
sorry, it was saying the host is now allowing participants to unmute. So you just, yeah.
Clerks, there seems to be a problem that we've got everyone's button muted tonight so that they can't turn themselves on and off. Wonder if that can be corrected, please. Go ahead, Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few questions, not to belabor the point. I think we had a thorough discussion through the committee. Yet I just want to address a few points once more, flag it for council's consideration as we hopefully look at this again in the future. Regarding our suburban and central neighborhoods, if you look at the maps in a report, page 39 of 44, and as well as 40 of 44, it outlines the boundaries of the central neighborhoods and the suburban neighborhoods. And much of today later on as well, we're going to be talking about our land needs assessment and talking about the missing middle and seeing softer intensification in our city through more growth targets. Why are we not addressing a larger area included as part of the central neighborhoods, where we want to show increased growth of that softer intensification or that missing middle?
Through the chair, I'll take that one. The central neighborhood is one that we have used for a number of years and historically has been in place. It's more of a planning delineation as opposed to a finance one. So through our next DC update, we have committed with discussions with our planning people to review if we should be having some sort of a different boundary for that, but it's not something that we would lead through the DC process. It would be led by planning and come into effect if it were completed before the next DC process.
And the next DC process, just as a reminder, 2024, 2025?
It can be as long as 5 years. So it could be out as far as 2027, but we can review it prior to that as we've opened up early this time because of a change in legislation.
Okay, and as planning moves forward with the better outline of the boundaries as well, we can accelerate that consideration?
We could, if we believe that was a big enough reason to reopen, we could open up our bylaw essentially for any reason. There's work and cost to it, but again, we would look for direction from council.
Okay, all right. And additionally, why don't we have three segments of central neighborhoods, suburban, and greenfield, where if you see again the boundary, a significant part of these suburban neighborhoods are already built up neighborhoods where infrastructure already exists, soft and hard. Why are we not placing a greater emphasis for development cost or the infrastructure cost where areas of greenfield? So that there's more equity between three, the central, suburban, and then greenfield.
Yes, through the chair, I would say it's a similar answer that we looked at planning to whether we should have separate boundaries or different zones, any of that sort of stuff, as opposed to finance making that kind of delineation.
Okay, all right. So I what I'm hearing is now's not the time, but we should have a greater reflection point on these points. Is that fair to say?
Sure, and again, we heard from industry about that as well, calling, I think one of the acronyms, the BUA or built up area, that I believe is kind of more of what you're talking about, Councillor Singh, considering do we have a built up area and then truly the greenfield area.
Is there hindrance to delay the adoption of the bylaw so that we can have these points addressed rather than having to incur that cost of reopening up the bylaw?
There is, as we've talked about previously, it's advantageous for the city to move ahead with the bylaw now because of the change, especially with the 10% reduction automatically that was in the previous legislation that is out now. If we don't move with our bylaw in the near term, then we're going to have to pay hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars extra on especially Parks and Rec kind of infrastructure that we would not want to.
And I don't want that either. Just as a quick comment though, if the industry feedback was that we need to have a new designation for a built up neighborhood, that's something that we should have worked to include in this time around. I think it goes to show that we can't necessarily wait for the full 5 years. We'll likely have to have that earlier conversation, and hopefully future councils will progress that dialogue forward. Thank you,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor.
And
I'll be happy to move this when it's just ready.
I just wanted to clarify the feedback that we got on that happened the day that we had the public input meetings, and nobody delegated, but I got an email response essentially to that effect on that day. So again, it was quite late in the process and we've committed to look at it for our next bylaw update.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if you could allow, would staff be welcome to a direction that outlines for us to look at this again and say in 2024, so 2 years out, or 2023? Or is it better for us to see once we've adopted and see how the industry is moving and allow this as an open discussion part of?
Sure. Well, I was going to say, I know your question was to the mayor, but again, just to jump in quickly, there's also the regional official plan, which will have an impact on things. And we think it's probably advantageous to wait for our next update to see what happens with that, which again, could be a few years out, but that's going to be a really key thing that would change the landscape essentially and what we think is going to happen in Kitchener.
Okay, all right. Hoping to have the equity soon, but that's great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the extra indulgence.
Okay, thank you. There don't appear to be any other questions from council, so we'll move on to our next delegation. Thank you, Natalia, for being here in case there were. Our next delegation is Hannah Domagala from Pro Valley Development Corporation. Welcome, Hannah.
Hello. Nice to see you again. I will be nice and brief again on my topic. I am actually surprised to be here because I didn't know there would be any changes that I would have to speak on. But this morning, as I strolled to council agendas on Monday mornings, I noticed that there's a point relevant in the DC background study summary. There was attachment 1, which summarized 4 points that were changed since March 31st. And the last point related to the Upper Hidden Valley sanitary pumping station and force main, which is being developed right now, the EA for it. And of course, it affects the lands that Pro Valley Development Corporation owns, which I worked for. And of course, it updates prices, which I cannot comment on, but in the last point, it does change the construction cost and timeline. And it says that the changes have been made due to coordinating timelines with the region of Waterloo. The mayor is obviously on a regional council, but not all of you may know that River Road extension was again delayed in this current budget's discussions in November and December of last year at the regional level. And now the new timeline is that the section going through Hidden Valley that relates to our lands will be developed in 2023-2024. So that's the latest in the budget right now in River Road. So when this little sheet says that changes have been made because of coordination with the region, I am really surprised to see that because now construction is scheduled for this pumping station to 2024. And as we know, and I can assume, the underground water services are put in at the beginning of construction. So I am just kind of surprised and questioning and want to raise your attention and hope to change that, to put that construction cost in 2023. Maybe there's a technical answer why it's done in 2024, but I want to bring to your attention that the region, as far as I know, is scheduling it to 2023-24. And definitely we are interested in developing this area of town, especially with all of the secondary plan work happening right now, as soon as possible. And interesting enough, if you think people don't listen to your council meetings, I did all afternoon. It was a very interesting discussion. And I like having a minute here because when you consider land needs assessments and designate the greenfield, do think of Hidden Valley. It's a large area, 80 acres of developable land right within the built-up area. So right within town, we know it's greatly connected by transit and so on, a wonderful place for neighborhoods. And it is given the density for a suburban subdivision. So when you give your comments or when you think about it, think about that there's all these exceptions. And what we can do in Hidden Valley and what we plan for in Hidden Valley can greatly impact how much land we need elsewhere. So there's so much density, varying density that can be put next to the LRT right in Hidden Valley, for which we can plant more than average numbers of people and residents and employment in that area. So that's on the land needs assessment discussion, but to make this happen, we need these services brought in. And I don't know if there's any staff who can answer why this was done to 2024, but I would ask that mayor or members of council move this forward to 2023 to align with what is in the regional budget.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Magala, and we'll ask staff to respond to that. Mr. Hagee.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair, the change was made based on feedback we received from the industry on April 25th, and the information came from Hans Gross, our Director of Engineering, and I don't have any particular knowledge of the the project or timing or any of that sort of stuff, but it's based on feedback from our director of engineering.
Mr. Reedman?
It's through the mayor. And so in the June committee cycle, the environmental assessment is coming for council for approval. And that will start the review period. And then, once the review period is finished, and if there's no appeals on the project, then detailed design will happen. And so that's part of the rationale behind the timing. So we still have to do the detailed design on the pumping station and sewer system once the EA is finalized and approved.
I'm not sure that answers the question, though, Mr. Reedman, as to the timing. I mean, I guess I'm a little confused because the direction at regional council was actually for staff to meet with the property owner to see how to get it back on track for the current time frame. So, and that was supposed to come back to regional council. So this is the first I'm hearing that in fact it's 23, 24 now. And then hearing that from our end, it's now 2024. So I'm not sure. Mr. Reedman, and then I will give Ms. Domagala an opportunity to just have a follow-up.
Yes, through the mayor. And so detailed design does take a bit of time to do. So we are talking about a force main and a pumping station. And so there is some additional work that has to happen as part of the detailed design. And so the environmental assessment was the first phase in the work. And the overall project schedule has been mapped out with the region as well. And I believe an email was shared with you a few months ago based on the overall timing of the projects, but I can look and follow up on that.
Yeah, I'm still concerned around that timing. Ms. Domagala, a follow-up?
Yes, you said it, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yes, the direction at the regional council was to speed up things as much as possible, and we are working with city staff on the EA and all the details. We have had multiple letters and one meeting, hopefully another one soon as well, to move this forward, which means that the EA would finish hopefully this summer, which means it could be designed and tendered over the next year, which means it could be, assuming that the region continues on this trail. And I mean, as you remember, Mr. Mayor, you said it yourself that we want River Road extension built. So for the region and the city to work together to bring this as soon as possible. So definitely in the regional budget, it is 23-24, and we from our end would definitely see this project be maintained in 2023, unless something happens and needs to be deferred again. But of course, it's always easier to postpone it than it is to bring it back in the budget, especially as money is tight in everyone's budget.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Domagala. Any follow-up questions of staff? So I guess I have a follow-up question then, Mr. Hagee. In light of the comments from the delegation, what if this was going to, how does this impact? If the work can be done, can it start in 2023?
Through the chair, it could. Something of this size would have to come to council potentially for award. And so if everything moved ahead quickly enough, we could potentially award in 2023, knowing that the funds are coming and being approved in the 2024 budget. I imagine a large portion of the cost would hit in 2024 anyway, just from a cash flow point of view. Even if it were able to be, the EA were able to be completed in essentially a year, by the time we get out and tender everything, it would be late in the year potentially for the project to start. And I'm not, again, not in engineering, so I don't know if digging in the winter would really be a wise decision, but I imagine the majority of the costs would hit in 2024 regardless.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Singh, Councillor Singh's no longer, there he is. Councillor Singh, you indicated you wanted to move this, I believe.
Yeah, I can move that with the remaining comments. I don't know if that needs to be something that's included to give some sense of direction that work could potentially be accelerated. Does that needs to be added as the direction, or that's something that can be a part of discussion for the budget year for 2023?
Through the chair, I would suggest it would make sense not necessarily to be through passing of the DC bylaw, but again, if it's something that's on council's radar and we are moving fast along, it's something that could even have special reporting from engineering. That may be in better time or more real time than waiting for an annual budget process.
So maybe Councillor saying your motion is to approve the DC bylaw with a report to come back on how to move this forward in 2023 timing from a construction point of view.
From engineering perspective,
Engineering point of view. Thanks.
yes, that would be good. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take that as a motion. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Ioannidis, thank you. Councillor Ioannidis, you have your hand up.
Wouldn't it be prudent to also consult with the region on that, since they're the ones that had approved that timeline?
Well, the region's timeline is 2023-24.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking maybe it's good to consult with them as well.
So presumably staff will do that as part of the process of bringing a report back. So it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We'll now move on then to item 6.2, the official plan amendment for 20 Ottawa Street North. And we have Mr. Dave Aston from MHBC Planning and Zach Zaire from Zaire Group to answer any questions from council. And Mr. Stevenson is here. Are there any questions? Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I just want to thank the delegates for meeting with staff and I in follow up to our committee meeting to discuss potential ways forward with regard to the two main concerns that we've heard from residents, and that's the pedestrian connections and additional green space. And I'm just like to ask Mr. Zaire or Mr. Aston to just comment on where we're at.
Sure, so I'll take that. Good evening, council. So like Councillor Marsh said, we had a call last week where we talked in some detail about our plan as we move forward with this project. We discussed that some of the items we've heard along the way are items that we can work with staff on at the site plan level. And I think Councillor Marsh, you're obviously always welcome to join us in any capacity to that as well. We'd be happy to have you at the table. So we are committed to that. We think this is a great project. We think this is a great location, and we're looking forward to moving it further along the approvals process. So I'm here, and Dave Aston is here tonight to answer any questions should council have any, but looking forward to working with the council, the city staff, and the community to evolve this project from a design standpoint.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I guess question of staff, Mr. Mayor. So if staff could just comment on, what can be done at this stage and what needs to wait until site plan.
Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we are recommending that through the site plan review process, where the building locations and setbacks are going to be established, our landscape architects from our Parks and Cemeteries division review and look for opportunities where we can have, whether it's public park space, whether it's parkland contribution in cash, whether it's publicly accessible park spaces, and we'll determine what the best application is. We do know from the applicant that there is a desire to participate in some enhancements, so we are going to continue to look through those details as part of the site plan process. So I wouldn't recommend any direction in the site-specific bylaw at this time. We don't have any concepts prepared, but certainly that's something that Councillor Marsh, I'm happy to report back to you once those details do become available.
Yeah, thank you. I will appreciate being able to be a part of site plan meetings in the future. And we can all agree that the term pocket park can be parked for now. Is that right? For this particular development?
I can agree to that.
I can agree as well.
All right. So we're not going to call anything a park unless it actually is a park, but we can call them a beautiful open entryway or whatever we want to call it, but just not a park. Thank you very much for your time. And and I'm satisfied with that. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions of the delegation? Councillor Davey.
Yeah, apologies, maybe I'm misremembering. Was there an offer last week of a contribution donation towards affordable housing for this project?
Yeah, so Councillor Davey, we will be making an affordable housing donation as part of this project. The group has yet to be determined or that we're making that donation to, but we will be working with one of our strategic partnerships.
Okay, and just for the record, can we get the quantum on record so that it can be tied to the approval?
Yeah, it'll be around $350,000.
Around $350,000. Okay, and again, just a question of staff, then, if I could, so that the delegates said here, and with all due respect, the delegate things have to be in writing. Does the recommendation include that approximate $350,000 donation as a condition of approval?
Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, it does not. We don't recommend putting the direction as part of a council resolution. The applicant has indicated their willingness to participate. We have not made that a requirement with previous development proposals where cash contributions have been donated. And part of the reason behind that is we are not involved in selecting which affordable housing provider will receive the funds, and we are not involved in how that affordable housing provider may choose to use the funds. So we have asked the applicant to declare and confirm publicly as part of this meeting, and it's something that we track internally in planning through the subsequent approval process.
Okay, I just need some clarity then from staff then, because my understanding, if we approve this and it's not as a condition of the approval, and with respect, I have every confidence that Mr. Zare will follow through on that. But I'm talking about like in general in terms of the policy and things going forward. Could a developer not potentially change their mind after they get their approval on that donation if it's not tied to the approval? And again, I'm not looking for a location to where it goes, but a notional approval that it will be donated in some sense to an affordable housing entity.
So I can confirm that the contribution and the dedication is within the staff report, which informs council's decision. Changes to the Planning Act have prevented the ability for us to enter into new bonusing agreements. The window on that, the last cycle was one of the last opportunities to do that. So we know that through inclusionary zoning and community benefits charge and tools that will be coming, we will look to securing these. But in this interim, we are looking to we certainly want to be able to support the applicant in making those contributions to this need in our community, but we don't have the legal mechanism right now to make it part of the resolution, but it's certainly something that we are tracking and people are aware of.
Okay, I appreciate it's on the radar. Just before I go, I just wanted to thank Zach and the Zare Group for making that contribution. It's very much needed. Thank you.
Thanks. Just before I go to the other two, just on that, Mr. Stevenson, I mean, I recognize that the Planning Act may not allow for it, but can you not do a supplement, like a secondary memorandum of understanding that just speaks to it?
So, Mr. Mayor, we did put the information as part of the staff report. At this time, it would not be, I would not provide a planning recommendation that council should resolve for this donation. And I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of legal, but it's not something that we've been advised should be included in any recommendation or a memorandum of understanding, but something that we are tracking internally and working with the receivers of those funds to understand how they've been used.
Okay, I mean, I too don't have any concerns with the applicant in question, but I think good business practice would suggest that we should come up with a way of doing that. So I'll come after Councillors Singh and Marsh. I'll be asking legal to comment on that. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you. I think you addressed my point regarding the memorandum of understanding. So if there's some more way of formalizing that contribution, and again, my concern isn't similar to yours, that they would not move forward with a commitment. It's just for optics, I think it clearly outlines the level of commitment from the development community towards affordable housing initiatives as well. And a little further, Mr. Mayor, just a high view kind of question. When looking at what the commitment was from the project in Belmont Village, and then Tech Tower, and now this, are we monitoring a general pool of fund that's being now accumulated, so that we can more, I guess, communicate out to the community this growing support towards affordable housing?
Mr. Stevenson?
I just don't want this to be lost on the community, even though these are funds that are being given out and future projects will be derived from these funding sources. I just want to start ensuring that we are tying that support towards affordable housing and the community benefit that's being coming out of these I guess approvals of these projects.
So certainly it's something that we are tracking and planning. So we have the developers who are making the contributions, and then we also have the affordable housing providers that are receiving the funds. We're in constant communication with those providers as they continue to develop their projects. We do know that the transfer funds, there are plans in place to make those transfers at the appropriate time as it involves both parties. We don't get involved in the financial transfer, but we do know that those sums of money, the couple of $100,000, are often what's needed in order to launch and to do the design phase of some of those projects. And planning staff working with the affordable housing providers, we're starting to see plans develop for projects that we expect to become formal applications shortly.
Okay, well, just I think more sort of flag it on for the future as well. I think it would be good for us to start kind of having that the fund tracker. To my earlier point, I think it more so addresses the overall community benefit from these development projects, and also our commitment and the development community's commitment towards affordable housing that's coming on their own accord, as opposed to where it's being mandated. So it shows a very collaborative process, and we get these wins, but sometimes we don't necessarily continue on showcasing exactly the positive wins that came out of it. So if there's a way as part of our development process that shows the tracking of these funds, I think it would be advisable. More so a comment, not necessarily related to this file.
Thanks for that, Councillor Singh. Councillor Marsh, you're still on? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was trying to tell you that you're on mute, but took my hand up. So I think that this discussion is a positive one. I think that it's really clear that to all of us that there needs to be a better system, a better way for us to, everyone in the community knows that affordable housing is a top priority, and a better way for us to be able to keep that message loud and clear to those who receive approvals for zone change amendments, that it is an expectation throughout the city for us to see increased affordable housing. We also know, though, that even a huge amount, which would be like a huge amount from a personal point of view, $350,000 is a lot of money, but it actually we know also that it doesn't go a very long way in putting a dent in how much affordable housing can be built. I think it's more meant to be a matchable amount that then can trigger additional dollars to be matched at other levels of government. And final point, just with regard to this development, this is not something that we need to tie to 20 Ottawa Street North, because as far as I understand it, the Zaire Group is looking for a strategic partnership that might not look like an exact dollar transfer, but we don't know yet what that will look like, and so it's early days, and so let's if we have a tracking mechanism, we also can't tie it just to when we provide approval. It also needs to be based on when the transfer happens and how it happens. So all these things are food for thought, and we hope that I hope that staff can as we go forward provide more of an infrastructure for us to track that.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. There don't appear to be any further questions. Thanks, Thanks, Mr. Aston and Mr. Zaire for, actually, I guess I'm supposed to, Mr. Aston and Zach, because Zach keeps reminding me that Mr. Zaire is his father. So, okay, thanks. Thanks for coming in today. Just as a follow-up question then, I guess, on that issue to staff, and what Ms. McDonald, I mean, is that something that you and, Mr. Reedman and the team can take away and figure out how we can deal with these in the interim period and also track these things?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to take a look at it from a legal perspective, and we can work with the folks in planning to figure out if there's something that we can do to address the comments that were made tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Chapman, I'll come to you since this is a planning matter to bring it forward.
Okay. What do I say?
Well, you'd bring forward the recommendation.
Okay, I bring forward the recommendation to accept the item. Oh, geez. Sorry.
6.2, the official plan amendment for 20 Ottawa North.
Okay, thank you. You want me to say all that? Okay, so I bring
yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, sorry.
And sorry, do I have a seconder? Sorry, Councillor Johnson. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we'll now move on to reports of the committees. Finance and Corporate Services, Councillor Galloway Seelock.
Yes, it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Davey that items 7.1.a to 7.1.d be approved from Finance and Corporate Services Committee, and those being the Municipal Election Compliance Audit Committee, the Delegated Authority Restricted Acts Provisions, the Business Licensing 3-year Review and the Housekeeping Amendments, and the Capital Financing and Debt Policy.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway Seelock. Are there any questions or comments on any of those items? If not, then all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Council. We'll now move on to 7.2, Community and Infrastructure Services Committee. Councillor Marsh.
Yes, it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Schneider that item 7.2 A to E be adopted.
A to E or A to F, you mean?
A to F,
Okay.
that's right.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Marsh. And as noted, it's been seconded by Councillor Schneider. Comments, Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I would like to deal with item 7.21 separately, please.
7.21. I think you mean, I'm gathering you're thinking 7.2F?
Oh, if that's what it is, it could be.
Is it the rec complex?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I'll deal with 7.2F separately. Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a brief comment on 7.2E, the advanced meeting infrastructure.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to see this before us. It's early stages, but I said my piece back at the committee meeting, but the one thing I neglected to mention is if we go ahead with this this initiative, it's possible that we'll be also putting in the infrastructure for other smart city initiatives, so smart signals around the city for varying things. So I would just like to, I'm not going to make a motion of it, just mention to staff that I hope that they include our digital lab to see what other avenues we can explore when we go down this road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey, for those comments. So I don't see any other comments. I'll deal with 7.2 A through E first. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And I'll deal with 7.2 Fs as requested by Councillor Gazzola. All those in favor?
No, excuse me. I'd like to make a comment, please.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, And I'd also like to call for a recorded vote, as this is the most expensive capital project ever undertaken by the city of Kitchener. I'd like to get everybody's name on the record. I did not support this when it came to committee. Not that I don't like beautiful new buildings, and realize that they would be well used, and that there are shortages of these facilities. Actually, not only in that ward, but in several wards across the city. But I must say, I was really taken aback that there was not one comment from any member of council when that came before committee, considering that the project had gone from a budget of, I believe it was 39 million or something to 93 million, a substantial change. And there was not one comment. Every member of council did nothing but speak praises for the project. There was not one question. Can we look at maybe not doing everything? Can we postpone something? Can we look at different alternatives? Not one comment. In fact, there was one comment that said, it mirrors such a great job such as Rim Park. Rim Park was the biggest financial fiasco in the history of this region. So I hope this doesn't appear the same as that project. So, and the other comment I want to make that was made by several members of council, that it's not costing the taxpayers any money because it's paid for by development charges. Well, there's only one taxpayer. Development charges don't come from heaven. Development charges are just taxes that are collected by the development industry and paid to the city, but charged to the homeowners. And they probably not only pay for the development charge portion, but the developers probably throw a little of their profit rate in on that also. So there's no free lunch. It's an excellent project. No, I don't deny that. I just wish that perhaps we would question when a project goes from 39 million to 93 million. At least let's say, are you sure? Can we not have another look? So thank you very much for allowing me to make the comments.
Thanks, Councillor Gazzola. I have numerous comments, but I'll wait until others make theirs. Councillor Marsh.
Well, certainly when staff informed us of the change in dollar amount, I had several questions that I asked directly to staff, but not at the public meeting. And absolutely, this is a high increase in the costs. But I do also want to just question whether or not this would be the most expensive capital expenditure that the city's ever made. If we account for inflation, my guess is that City Hall would have been higher at the time. But that's just a comment. I'm not trying to ask staff to confirm. I just think that this is a really important piece of infrastructure. And again, as I mentioned at committee, we have not had a new swimming facility in 32 years. And this community has grown so much, and it is time. It's time for us to make sure that the core services that we provide are available to our citizens.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. And just for the benefit of your question, I quickly used an inflation calculator on the net, and in fact, 60 million in 1993 is worth about 120.05 million today, based on an average inflation rate of 2.42% between 1993 and today. So you are correct in suggesting it would not be the most expensive project. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic. And Councillor Marsh, I agree. We had a great opportunity to have these conversations with staff and ask some questions about the cost. Nobody likes it that the cost has gone up as much as it has. It is the reality of the situation with inflation at the moment. And my thoughts at the time and continue to be is that what is the cost of not doing this? When I attend our Economic Development Advisory Council meetings, we hear from people in the tourism sector. We hear from our business leaders here who talk about the need to improve our recreational infrastructure so that we're not missing out on getting, different games and different sporting events coming here. Not to mention the people that want to move to our community who are talented, who are here to work in different sectors of our economy, and who expect to be able to have sporting and recreational opportunities for themselves and for their families. So sometimes we need to look at the cost of something, and it is regrettable for all of us whenever things do go up in price. But also, what is the cost of not doing this? And I think, we only need to look to neighboring communities where they have put off maybe building recreation facilities, and just how much those have gone up in cost, et cetera. So it's the time to do it now. We've got a great plan in place here, and I look forward to seeing this being a difference maker in our community for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Are there any further comments? If not, I'll just very briefly comment further to the clarification that Councillor Marsh had made earlier. I am extremely supportive of this project. This area of the city has been growing rapidly for many, many years. And the city has been collecting property taxes in this area while the residents have been patiently waiting for their turn to see investments in the necessary recreational amenities that not only, quite frankly, will serve the southwest of the city, but in fact will benefit the entire city. Because right now we're seeing waiting lists in our pools and other recreational amenities because of the fact that, in fact, people from this area are having to travel to other parts of the city. We know that when folks are also traveling, it's not helping us do our part in terms of meeting issues around GHG emissions and climate change as well. So getting these recreational amenities closer to people's neighborhoods where they can walk, cycle, and have other options to get to these amenities will only help us meet some of our other objectives and goals that both this council and our community has. It's important to remember, that the kinds of recreational amenities we're talking about are important from a quality of life perspective, but as Councillor Johnson has indicated, are also important from an economic development point of view as we look to attract and retain talent in our community. So for those reasons and more, I will be supporting this. And I do also need to say, I don't remember the context around Rim Park that was used the other day, and regardless of what the views may be about that as a financial arrangement, that is absolutely has nothing to do with this project, and the only thing that is comparable here is the value that Rim Park is as a recreational amenity for ratepayers in the city of Waterloo in this region. And this would certainly provide something similar in Southwest Kitchener. Councillor Galloway-Seelock, you've been the ward councillor, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the, quite frankly, past 16 years of passionate, dedicated advocacy that you have done as we got to this point today. And so I'll give you the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to be brief and take this opportunity to thank staff for all their work on this project. There's a reason why the cost was inflated the way it was. Number one is inflation. Number two, there's an increase in the building size. And number three is it's a net zero building. Those are just to name a couple of the reasons why the cost has increased so much. But like Councillor Marsh said, there hasn't been a new facility in 32 years, and it's time that we do this. And this plan has been in the works for over 20 years. Before my time on council, it's been in master plans and leisure facilities master plans, in the Southwest District master plan. So it's time that we move forward with this, and I'm grateful for all of council's support on this project moving forward.
Thank you. So recorded vote has been called, and I will start actually with Ward 5, Councillor Galway-Sealock.
I'm in favor.
Ward 6, Councillor Singh.
I'm also in favor.
Ward 7, Councillor Ioannidis.
I'm in favor as well.
Ward 8, Councillor Johnson.
I'm in favor.
Ward 9, Councillor Chapman.
In favor.
Ward 10, Councillor Marsh.
In favor.
Ward 1, Councillor Davey.
In favor.
Ward 2, Councillor Schneider.
I'm in favor.
Ward 3, Councillor Gazzola.
Opposed.
Ward 4, Councillor Michaud.
In favor?
And the mayor is in favor, so it carries on a vote of 10-1. Thank you, council. We'll now move to, actually, we've already done planning and strategic initiatives. So we'll now move to item number 8, the unfinished business. And this is the regional official plan review, draft lands needs assessment, carrying this over from council earlier today. There were 2 councillors that indicated they had motions they wanted to bring forward, Councillor Davey and Councillor Chapman. But before I go to those motions, I would ask if there's any further questions of staff. Okay, sorry, Councillor Singh, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as an alternative, what we had also considered was potentially deferring this to I guess, committee meeting. But in light of hoping to hear or see exactly what the regional staff might have in mind as to option 5, or an option that additional option that they're considering from the 3 that are outlined in this report. And additionally, seeing and observing the outcome of the provincial election, and then having some sort of indication of density guidelines in respect to what the current government has already addressed in their past comments. So if council were to defer as a wait and see approach, would staff have any issue or concern that this council's comments would not be included as a part of the region's overall, land use assessment policy?
So, Councillor Singh, I'll ask staff to respond to that, but just before they do, excuse me, are you looking at this coming forward? Would you be suggesting to committee day on the 8th or the 13th?
Our next date is, yes, our next date is the 8th. So I think earlier that would be better, so that we are in line before the regional council makes any decisions. So the 8th would be probably more prudent than the 13th. Again, I'm open to hearing staff's recommendation, or at least getting some guidance.
Okay, well, I see Mr. Pogrzeba. Help me here.
It's a silent R, Pogrzeba.
Pogrzeba. I'll ask Mr. Pogrzeba from the region to reply, and maybe he can, because I know this is going to other councils at different nights as well, so he may be able to shed some insight in that regard.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we could just hear the question again. I was a little late in joining, going between.
Okay, sure. So the question is, if council were to defer their taking a position today to allow the provincial election to pass and to have some further consideration of the information that's been shared. If we were to defer this until the 8th, would that still give the region the information they need towards, the work that you're doing to this so-called option 5 and ultimately the recommendation on the 15th?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we do plan to bring forward a recommended report on June 15th to Regional Council. We have heard from stakeholders from the various groups that are involved in the regional official plan. We have all intention of meeting the provincial deadline. Any additional information that we could receive before the submission deadline is obviously our preferred route, but we will work as hard as we can to take in all the information from council if that is received at the June 8th council meeting.
Councillor Singh, you still have the floor.
Yeah, not necessarily entirely clear with the response, Mr. Bugsiba. Again, the June 8th meeting would be still in advance of the regional council's meeting to decide on this. Also, the question was regarding regional staff coming forward with some additional recommendations. My assumption would be that regional councils will not be surprised on that day of. That recommendation would come advance, hopefully in some time before that. Would that recommendation be before the June 8th meeting, that if we were to defer to that date?
So my understanding is that later this week, we will have more information on what the recommendation will be. We are meeting with a lot of the stakeholder groups that we've heard earlier today throughout this week. And I believe our management staff will be meeting with Air Municipal planners and CEOs with more information on that preferred option, more probably around Friday.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm inclined to perhaps move forward that deferral recommendation towards the 8th, and that would give our staff some time to be observant of what that additional staff recommendation from the regional planning staff would be, and so that we incorporate our comments appropriate to full encompassing recommendations, as opposed to only seeing a part of the piece of that puzzle. But again, I'm going to delay that a little bit. I'm here to see if other members of council still have additional questions of the motions that are being put forward.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Singh. I will hold that motion in abeyance for the time being, and we'll come back to you. Thank you, Mr. Bugsiba. Next up, I have Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic, and thank you, Mr. Bugsiba, for being here tonight. So if we do not put something forward from the City of Kitchener, does that just mean that we miss out on this, that you would just go ahead with a report and it would just be missing any information from the City of Kitchener?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we would obviously prefer to have comments from the city. We will take into account all comments up until the 15th, but we would need to go forward. My understanding is we would need to go forward with a preferred growth option to Regional Council.
Is there a penalty for us not, for the region to not make this report by, and I'm sorry, the date is escaping me, but is there some type of a penalty that the province would impose on the region?
We were given a very direct deadline by the province. The province does have the option of intervening, and we would like to ensure that we get an approach that reflects our needs and wants as a community and as a region. It's very tough to say what would happen.
So Councillor Johnson, just to be clear, as was discussed earlier this afternoon, I mean, the deadline that the province has given, and Mr. Bugsiba, you can correct me, is July the 1st. We're not able to, Regional Council has made the decision that we won't be able to meet that deadline, but have signaled to the to provincial officials at the ministry that we're working on it and that we would have something to them before the end of August. And so right now it's scheduled for August the 18th for a special council meeting. But that obviously, it's subject to regional council making any further decisions on that date.
May I make a comment, Mr. Mayor, or do you want me to key back in again?
Yeah, let's hold off on.
Okay,
well,
thank you.
Yeah, we'll come back.
Thanks.
Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you. Just one question. Well, sorry, potentially two. Has option 5 been finalized at this point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not at this point. We are still working with our consultants and we're continuing to meet this week. I believe throughout this week we have meetings with the Community Option 4 group, as well as MHBC and a few other stakeholders that have interest in this. But by Friday, my understanding is we would have a better sense of what the direction is.
Okay, I'm trying to weigh the deferral option then. So it's possible then if council were to pass some direction today, that might actually find itself incorporated in option 5.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Marsh, you're up next.
So can I just ask for clarification about these dates? So the region has asked us to comment by June 15th, but the region is not making a final decision until August 18th. Is that correct?
Our recommendation report will be going to Regional Council on the 15th. And following that, we do have statutory public meetings, an open house and a statutory public meeting that will need to take place prior to the August date where council gets to vote on that option.
Okay. So I have a question of our staff, Mayor Verbanovic.
Go ahead.
So what I'm trying to understand here is if we're going to be asked to vote on a motion by one councillor and then potentially an amendment from another councillor and then a deferral from another, and yet our staff haven't created a report that we are, with a recommendation. What are you bringing forward to the region? Will you be bringing forward all the comments that we make tonight, or just the motion or amendment that we vote on? Can you please help clarify so I can, so myself and all of us can adjust our comments accordingly?
Mr. Donaghy.
Thank you, Councilor Marsh. Yeah, so we'll provide a record of all the comments provided by the clerk, the minutes of today as part of our record, and any motions, if council is able to coalesce around an option that's acceptable to the majority, we'll provide that as well. It's not strictly necessary that you resolve on a particular motion, but whatever council decides tonight, both their commentary and the resolutions will be provided.
Mm-hmm. And so if some comments are contrary to whatever motion potentially gets passed, then those comments will remain on the record and will be added to what regional council will have before them and the members of the public before them to understand where all of our council sits. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's fair.
Okay. And I guess the last question, just to put you on the hot seat for a second, again, can you just let us know what led staff to decide not to come forward with a recommendation here today?
This is the region's process. We've provided a lot of details and advice to council as we've gone through this process so far in 2 or 3 reports last year. Provided some highlights of what we think the implications are for Kitchener to you now tonight. I think it's fair to say that the majority of delegates you've heard tonight can't live with option 1. I think that's probably a fair comment of where staff's head is as well. The differences between option 2 and 3 are relatively minor in terms of the implications for Kitchener. Both have no expansion for community area. There's some changes in the DGA density that would resolve in the intensification target, but overall, in broad strokes, they're both reasonable outcomes.
Okay, thanks very much.
Councillor Chapman, I was muted again. Apologies.
Not a problem. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that, if I heard it right, that regardless of what we land on, if we don't all agree, all of the comments will be submitted in some form of report that staff creates, whether tonight or on the 8th, whatever we decide. Is that correct?
Well, so I mean, staff, actually, I'll let staff respond to that.
Through the mayor, and so we will be reporting all the comments, but the comments that council coalesces behind will carry more weight, obviously, if they go to council, because the majority of council would have to vote on that to advance that, to move it forward.
Okay, can I also ask that all of the written submissions we received be included in whatever we forward to the region?
Mr. Donaghy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that'll be part of the minutes that the clerk will provide as part of the package. So I think that's something we could ensure gets organized.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my comments are that when I originally had suggested a deferral, it was because I am very concerned about the timing, in that, again, we have a provincial election this week. The census data is not included in here. We're missing a lot of data, I think, that would really be useful in terms of us making some evidence-based decisions on something that's going to affect us for 30 years. And I don't feel that we have enough information. I don't feel, and through no fault of our staff, it's more, I think, the situation that we're not including groups of people, or we're not able to get some of the voices that really need to be heard on this. Because frankly, I can't remember who it was that said it earlier, but many of us might not be around the table later, but we're making very long-term big decisions here. And I don't think waiting until August 18th is going to be enough time either to have been able to gather this data. I mean, if that's the best that we can do in terms of putting something off until later, then so be it. But my concern is more big picture. We're not hearing all the voices that I think that we need to hear, and don't have enough data to make good decisions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Davey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure we're going to get to the part about potentially introducing motions, but I just wanted to make the point that, as was pointed out by the delegate, some feedback that we provide tonight can actually make its way into option 5, and that would be my preference to deal with my motion. And Councillor Johnson's point is well taken. I think that's covered off in the motion as well. So I was hoping that I could move that at this point in time, and then perhaps speak to it.
Yeah, I'll come back to you in a moment. I have a question myself, if I don't see any other questions right now. From a process point of view, Mr. Donaghy, if we were to consider the a motion, for example, such as what either Councillor Davey or Councillor Chapman want to bring forward this evening, could we consider those in principle? So it informs potentially option 5, but would require it to come back to us still on the 8th, so that we could we could finalize our position. So in other words, we're potentially trying to influence option 5, but in fact may take some other positions on the 8th based on what option 5 looks like when this meeting that was referenced by Ms. Bugziba for Friday after that happens.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think that's possible. Council could resolve on something tonight and then meet again and discuss on the 8th or thereabouts.
Okay. And I think, I guess the other piece though is that potentially doesn't deal with, I guess, Councillor Johnson's concern around the overall timing, and not having the access to things like the 2021 census data and so on to better inform some of this stuff. But that would then, I guess, require a motion or position from this council to the region, urging the region to consider delaying the process or asking the province for a delay in the process in order to get better information and be able to make better decisions. So is that sort of the proper channel or proper way of approaching that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think so. Just on the point of the census, got some information from our counterparts at the region mentioning that the full release of all census data, so I misspoke earlier when I said it would be end of 22, some of that will drag into 2023 to get the full package of census data. But I think you're right, your suggestion that we provide comments to the region as well as ask for a delay, if that's council's will, would be the appropriate way to go. And if council wanted to, directly lobby the minister, I suppose that's possible as well.
Okay, so with that, I guess I would, Councillor Davey, you had the floor first, and then I would, I guess, go to Councillor Singh on the deferral. So go ahead, Councillor Davey.
Yeah, certainly. Actually, I did email the motion, well, actually to all of council and the clerk as well, perhaps could be brought up on the screen.
Point of order, just a friendly point of order. I'm just trying to understand if we have a motion that's new versus an amendment, don't we take the amendment first, Mr. Mayor, or are we looking at both of these as motions?
I'm really looking, I think the intent of today was for us to provide feedback into the process, and that was the understanding. So I'm really treating both of them as motions. Okay, Councillor Davey.
Great. Yeah, so I'll just read it very quickly. Whereas Kitchener acknowledges we are in a housing affordability crisis, whereas Canada has the lowest housing supply per capita among the G7, and whereas Ontario has the lowest housing supply per capita among all provinces, whereas not accounting for any future growth, Ontario requires approximately 650,000 more homes just to meet the Canadian average per capita and approximately 1.2 million more homes to meet the average among the G7. Whereas the academic majority believes the primary cause of the current housing affordability crisis is due to lack of supply, including Crown Corporation CMHC, who recently stated, quote, "The biggest issue affecting housing affordability in Canada is that supply simply isn't keeping pace with demand. Therefore, be it resolved that Kitchener urges the region to research the broader supply issue and explore options outside of those proposed, notably to increase absolute growth targets to adjust for the current housing supply debt and deficits to date. Be it further resolved, the region be requested to work with city staff to ensure Kitchener's fair share of growth with respect to infill and intensification, but also in determining where greenfield expansion is appropriate via efficiencies of existing or planned near-term servicing. Be it finally resolved that any required greenfield growth be confined to within the established countryside line or on lands not designated protected countryside."
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davy. Is there a seconder for that? Sorry, just can't see hands. Councillor Schneider, thank you. This guy and Councillor Davy, is the intent that this would is as is, or be in principle with the intent of coming back on the 8th, or what is?
I would say it's as is, and that's only because I don't think there's anything in this motion that speaks to a change in provincial government, and it would, my preference would really be that it inform the proposed option 5 rather than trying to change it after the fact. So I would move it, I guess, finally at this point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, so I don't have an issue with that. I think what's being outlined by Councillor Davy through his motion, I think gives a very broad sense of key points that this council has given, feedback in the past as well, and from what I've heard from my colleagues. So I think the recommendation, or at least the guidance that's being provided through Councillor Davy's motion, can help inform regional staff of their additional opinions. But I think going back to what I've said and what Councillor Johnston has raised as well, I think we do have to have additional look on the meeting of the 8th, so that we can provide further comment on the additional information that may be available, because we're only seeing half the piece right now. This recommendation can help inform a certain direction, and then we can see if it's captured as part of what's being supported by council today, if Councillor Davy's motion succeeds. And if it doesn't, we can further advocate for these points, or we can have additional motions for that date. I think both things can proceed forward, that we do have to have that future meeting, and also have that discussion on the motion that's being put place to refer these for regional staff's consideration.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I guess my motion will come later. I just have maybe some questions about the whereases in this motion, Councillor Davy. I'm not quite sure the relevance of some of them. We're talking about the regional official plan, and we're talking about Canada and Ontario, and so maybe you could just clarify more. You talk about the lack of supply and the academic majority position. I'm not quite sure how that's founded on any academic report. So maybe you could just give us a bit more information on what your what your grounding you're there for is on.
Certainly, I can source all of it. It's largely from the Scotiabank study that was conducted based on Statistics Canada's numbers comparing Canada, which even included information for Kitchener, surprisingly, and showing our lack of basically our lack of supply per capita in comparison to the rest of the country and the G7. Was there a specific? Was there a specific reference you were worried about? And sorry, I guess the other context I would provide is, I believe Councillor Chapman, you were at the regional meeting as well, where we just, the all council meeting, I should say, that we're all invited to. And part of the rationale for this is to really hammer home the supply issue side, because the region, the guest speaker that the region had at that time was, I think really his strongest point that he was trying to make was that supply isn't the issue. And I was Steve Pomeroy, and I was careful to ask him directly in that recorded session, you can go back and watch, is he in the academic majority? He said no, he is in the academic minority, and consequently CMHC, who I quoted, came out about a week later with the quote that I provided, because I assumed there'd be some questions on this. So if there's any specific other sourcing that you'd like me to reference, I'd be happy to, but really the sourcing is effectively Statistics Canada's numbers from 2016 and CMHC, which is a Crown corporation.
Right, but they're not academic sources, right? You're claiming that the academic majority believes something. The Scotiabank and the CMHC are not academic sources.
Right, and that's why I clarified with Mr. Pomeroy, who is an academic in this field, about his opinions of what the academic majority and minority are. And I can source other academics if that's what you prefer, but usually that sort of thing doesn't come in the form of a motion.
Right, and I guess we could just argue this for hours, but I just feel that those points do not speak to what we're trying to do here with the regional official plan. That's my main concern. When we get to my motion in a moment, I think some of these can complement each other. I worry that if we just pass this and this gets defeated, I think we've just left a whole bunch out that to me could be very problematic. So I'll wait to see where it goes from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. I just wanted to clarify with Councillor Davies' motion, because I can't see it no longer on the screen, but I was just wondering if there was one word we could remove, just so it just clarifies more or less where the SCIPA lands are. Yeah, so on the section, if we can just get rid of established, because it's really not really established yet what the countryside line is there. If that's a friendly.
I would say it's tantamount to the same thing. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Councillor Marsh.
I have a few questions about this motion, I guess for Councillor Davey, but perhaps if staff want to weigh in as well. I'm trying to understand, are you asking for us to comment on the region's official plan that we need to just urge more growth? When you refer to absolute growth targets, are you saying, well, regardless of the needs assessments that have been put forth, that we just need to grow more so that we have more supply?
Yes.
Yeah, is that what you're doing?
Sorry, yeah. So you might remember from my questioning earlier with the other regional delegate, to be frank, I was shocked to hear that they have not taken the current supply statistics into account at all. So this is purely projection growth, and that kind of boggles my mind, because that's implying that there isn't a housing shortage now that they need to compensate for. So yes, I would effectively be saying they need to increase the overall targets. We don't have to, obviously Kitchener only has to do its fair share amongst the entire province of Ontario and frankly Canada. So they need to take that into consideration in their calculations, but they haven't even looked at that. They haven't even included that at all. And frankly, I'm worried that if we continue this trend, we're going to find ourselves with a situation that's only worse in terms of affordability going forward. I hope that answers your question.
It doesn't fully, because what I'm trying to understand is if we have 20,000 units that are in the queue and they haven't even been started yet, even if we have way more aggressive growth targets, how is that going to influence the private sector in building more housing? What are you expecting will change based on your motion?
Well, none of us can force the private sector to build. All we can do is set targets and set appropriate zoning and land in order to build, right? So I can't force it any more than anyone, whether we set the target extremely high or extremely low. So I can't really answer that question except for staff to put those targets in place.
So, I mean, we've got density targets and intensification targets that were referred to earlier by the delegation, but the absolute growth targets that's a different it's a different topic that hasn't really been, like you say, the supply issue hasn't been fully addressed. So I find it a little, I'm just wondering if maybe our staff can comment on these 2 points, that one plus that our staff be requested to work with the regional staff to ensure. I find your motion difficult to support because I don't know quite how it's going to work. And so if staff can comment on this motion, and if they feel that this is something that can be that they can receive direction on based on this motion.
Mr. Donny Bainey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think I understood from Councillor Davies' motion that he would ask the region to consider a population forecast higher than 923,000 by 2051. That's and everything that implies would shake out from that. that in a manner to address an existing supply deficit, as Councillor Davey sees it from the various sources that he's reported. So that's how I would interpret that direction. But I'd appreciate clarity from Councillor Davey on that. That would be great. And then in terms of Kitchener's fair share of growth, we've included information in the staff report on page 5 about the share of population growth that would occur under options 1, 2, and 3, and how that compares to Kitchener's total share as of 2021 compared to the other area municipalities in Kitchener. So I think, currently option 2 and 3 are fairly well aligned with the current share, a little bit above the current share. In terms of dealing with the issue of supply on lands within the protected countryside line, I understand that to mean whatever portions of SKIP are not identified as being within the countryside line. So that's how I would interpret those three points of the councillor's motion.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Councillor Davey wants to comment on the one question from staff.
Right, certainly. So yeah, certainly on the density targets, yes. What we heard from the region is that they haven't taken into account that all the current, I'm just going to call it debt, so don't keep referring to debt deficits, of housing supply, and that needs to be incorporated in the growth numbers to compensate. So it would be higher than it normally would be because of the debt that we have, and then over time, when those numbers balance out, then we reassess.
Okay, I don't see that this motion says that yet, and I'd love to support a motion that says something closer to that. So anyway, I think we might have a second kick at the can on the 8th, but yeah, at this point I can't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Ioannidis, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. And I think just to clarify a little bit more to enforce some of Councillor Davies' motion, because a lot of the statistics that we were looking at from the regional perspective was done from 2019, and so they're off. And so I think your motion put forward makes a lot of sense to me, and as well, what I understand from delegations too, when we're looking at long-term planning, it takes 10 years before anything even developed. So if you look at Rosenberg, it's been 12 years plus since I've been on council, and it's finally just being developed. So I think that's part of the reason why I think that's in there in Councillor Davies' motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. Councillor Gazzola.
I'm just going to make a comment. This is just like watching sausages being made, and that's a messy thing. We seem to be going around in circles. The meeting today, I thought, was to listen to the public who came in to give their opinions, and listening to the public, the region put forward 3 proposals, 3 options. The public, who seemed very knowledgeable, came forward with what we called a 4th option. And then we're hearing that there's a 5th option floating around out there that we haven't seen or things. So the discussion now says, let's defer it until we have all the pieces together. And whereas now we're going to pass something, we're going to defer something. It's all pretty confusing. I'm prepared. We either pass something or much prefer to wait till everything comes in and make a decision at that time. We asked for public engagement, and the majority of the public that were speaking, all of them said, here are the types of things they said: let's slow down and get it right. Another one says there's no rush to reach a decision. we need to consult further with the public. We're just at the fork in the road. We're looking to 2051, and we want to seem to make all these decisions, pass all these resolutions tonight. And then we're saying, oh, maybe we should defer it too. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm prepared to support a deferral. I'm not prepared to support anything, chisel anything else into stone tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, further to the discussion, I think staff have already kind of commented as to how they're seeing these recommendations. I want to confirm they, in my mind, don't seem contrary to the overall recommendations that were part of the report in the various options. They seem all separately, but more so broad, where I think Mr. Dunnigan did address this, but he can confirm it again. This motion addresses that regional planning staff and council take a closer look or adjust their growth targets to anticipate for higher growth, which I think would be quite evident amongst all our opinions that that's a likely trend, as well as ensuring that the right amount of density happens across the three major cities, as opposed to more the greenfield being pushed on the city of Kitchener and more higher intensification targets in the other two cities, where I think it needs to be more equitable across so that we're getting the more appropriate sustainable development. And at the same time, ensuring that we have a better acknowledgement of the greenfield available lands that are within the countryside line. Would it be fair to say that all three recommendations don't necessarily go contrary to what's been already recommended through the staff report?
Mr. Donaghy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So there aren't any recommendations on content in my staff
or the options or the broad options in the recommendation.
Yeah. So I would say on the first point, none of the options 1, 2, or 3 consider a population forecast higher than 923. That would be a new bit of work, and I could ask Mr. Porgsba Pogziba, I said it wrong too, to comment. But I understand that would likely be quite a bit of work. The consideration that Kitchener get its fair share, both of intensification and greenfield, I think we have enough data in options 1, 2, and 3 to make an assessment on our from the data we have here, whether or not that's being reflected or not in the options. Sorry, Councillor Singh, I forgot the third part.
No, regarding the intensification, that they're equitable amongst the three main cities, as well as the available lands within the countryside line.
Okay, yeah. So your ask here is, is it appropriate that Kitchener has a higher intensification target than other cities?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't drawn out the Waterloo and Cambridge intensification targets for you tonight, but we can provide that.
Okay.
The other, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Singh.
No, please. I think it's more important to hear from you.
Councillor Singh, hang on. Mr. Reedman, are you looking to add something to this?
Yeah, through the mayor, and if I could just add Mr. Pogziba to talk about the clerk undercount when he talks about population forecast, because I asked a specific question at a technical meeting a few months ago about, we'd seen a lot more growth in the past than what was projected, and so I did ask that question, and he provided a response at the time as well, which may be helpful to this discussion.
Mr. Pogziba?
If I'm understanding the question correct, could you just say that question again, please?
Our growth projection, where in the past has superseded our expected growth, and is it fair to say that those trends could continue, that our growth targets will not necessarily be what the actual, the reality is, that the growth will be higher than what we're anticipating?
The growth forecasts that the province provided are above what our historical growth averages have been. Over the last roughly 30 years, we've averaged growth of about 13 to 14,000 units per 5-year period. The growth plan would require us to increase that to an average of about 20,000 units over a 5-year period. So it is increasing the growth rate compared to what we have seen historically over the past about 30 years.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Michaud.
Mr. Dunnigan, sorry, Mr. Dunnigan had was about to say something, then there was a bit of interruption on my part. I just want to make sure that he has an opportunity to finish the sentence.
Oh, that's good. Thanks, Councillor Singh. Nothing for me.
Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards Councillor Gazzola and Councillor Johnston with the deferral on this. We haven't got all the information. I mean, we don't even know what option 5 is. Councillor Davey is putting a motion forward. And while it does make sense and it could be folded into option 5, but we don't know what option 5 is. So I'm really struggling with how to vote on things that we don't even have all our information on. Not really a question, it's just more of a comment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Michaud. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, no, I agree that that we need more information. I would also like to suggest, I mean, I didn't create my comments, or what I presented was not a motion for a very specific reason, because I thought it was better to think of these suggestions as that staff would consider them when they come back to us with sort of a report based on what we heard today and what you know, what we've discussed today. So to this point, pass a motion, whether it be motion 1 or motion 2, I think it's kind of missing both a full assessment of what we heard today, but also it doesn't take into account the information that we're still missing. So I don't consider mine a motion. I put it as an amendment to the report for consideration. And I think that I'm okay with that at this point. It doesn't have to be voted on. It's to say to staff here, consider these items and that we bring it back whatever date we agree on.
Okay. Any, thank you, Councillor Chapman. So I will, I haven't made any comments yet. I do understand the position around wanting to try to influence this so-called option 5 that apparently is out nebulously out there, that regional staff are meeting about with area municipalities, and it makes it very difficult for us to inform the process in a meaningful way before we actually have all of the positions. I mean, it speaks to frustration that I know I and others have articulated in the past around this whole process being rushed and us not having the ability to ensure that the right level of dialogue is occurring. I guess I'm in the chair, so I can't move an amendment, but certainly I would be more comfortable if we were approving this in principle today, with it coming back on the 8th. I think it, fundamentally, I understand where Councillor Davies coming from, and notionally agree with those positions. But I want to have enough sort of leeway and wiggle room to adjust depending on what the region comes back with, with respect to this so-called option 5 that might be considered, because at the end of the day, this is a regional process and regional council will deal with it and make a decision. And so the main area for delegations to provide input has been through the regional process, through the regional engage, through regional public meetings, and through the public meetings that are going to happen between now and August 18th, including, you know, any input on June 15th and so on. This is really our opportunity for us as a city to express what matters to us. You know, certainly we're in a position to consider public input as part of that and staff input, but this is really council's opportunity to put some ideas on the table to be considered as part of the region's process, and whether that's through the general dialogue that's happening in this session or any specific motions that come forward. So those are my thoughts. So Councillor Ioannidis.
Mayor Urbanovic, in light of your comments, I'll prepare to move it in principle.
So you're moving that as an amendment to Councillor Davies'
Yes.
motion? Okay. Councillor Chapman.
So we haven't looked at my amendment motion, whatever we want to call it. So where does that fit into this scenario?
Well, my intention would be to come to yours next.
Okay.
And then go from there. So Councillor Gazzola, and then I guess I'll deal with the amendment. I don't want to go through another round of debate and conversations. Councillor Gazzola?
You're advocate. We don't have everything on the table, and yet you're saying, let's go ahead and make a decision. I think you either make a decision or you defer it. You can't do both things. So I won't. I'll only support a deferral at this point.
Okay, is that what you're moving, Councillor Gazzola? You're muted, Councillor Gazzola.
No, I know I did, because I thought a deferral had already been put on the table.
People have spoken of it, but there was no motion.
I will put forward a deferral then, and to move everything to that deferral. Now, we were speaking at a date of
June the 8th.
June the 8th, and there's another. There are meetings on the 13th and the 20th. So I don't know what the staff need to be able to put things together to deliver to the region. What's the date that they can work with? And I'll pick.
I think what we heard from Mr. Bugziba was that if we got something in on the 8th, it could still factor into their report, which would get released on usually the 10th for regional consideration on the 15th.
Will we have option 5 before then?
Mr. Bugziba, can you let us know?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the intent of the preferred growth option, or as it's kind of been referred to here, growth option 5, we've brought forward 3 options in the land needs assessment. They provided a kind of a range of density targets, a range of intensification rates. It starts a conversation for community members such as yourself and council to see what the impacts of different intensification rates, different DGA density targets could be, with the intent of potentially one of those options fitting really well with the direction that you'd like the region and then the city to go. But there is obviously the option for you to partially endorse an option with a minor revision to one. We've had suggestions that option 2 aligns very closely with some of the needs, but we'd like to see slightly higher intensification rates if we could. So that's the option 5 preferred growth option. The intent of that is to come forward to council with a recommendation that encapsulates all of the information we've heard through our consultation.
So, Mr. Pugziba, I think what Councillor Gazzola is trying to find out is if we refer this to come back to council on the 8th, will we know what the region's option 5 is by then so that we can have that information and provide informed input to the region about Kitchener's position?
I believe that that information, the 8th, we would still be able to incorporate that into the preferred growth option.
Sorry, that's not the question. The question is, will the region let us know by the 8th what option 5 is so that on the 8th we can actually make an informed opinion?
We will not have a finalized option by the 8th, but we will have some indication of the direction in which we are going. So the input would still be valuable to that preferred growth option.
Okay, respectfully, I'm kind of getting confused myself. Ms. Goss, can you help here?
I will do my best, Mayor. So through the Mayor, it is my understanding that additional information will be provided from regional staff to city staff towards the end of this week to help us understand the direction that the region may be considering, all public input that has been gathered so far. That will be informing their report to Regional Council on June 15th. So we will have some additional information towards the end of this week that we can then package up and through regional staff and us share with Committee of Council on June the 8th. That information can then go back to the region and be considered as part of the June 15th reporting process.
Okay, so that has I think helped. Councillor Gazzola, the floor was still yours.
So I will move a deferral until the June 8th meeting of City Council. It's a committee. It'll have to be a special meeting after the committee meetings.
I don't know if it'll be after or before. Leave that with me.
But
I'll work with clerks on that.
Okay, but that'll be the date of my recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, is there a seconder for that deferral motion? Councillor Marsh, thank you. I did see earlier Ms. Fusco's hand up. Were you still looking to speak or?
Through the Mayor to Council, it was with respect to the approval in principle. We've passed that point. We're on to the deferral motion now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh on timing.
Well, it's more of a process question, Mr. Mayor, regarding the deferral, and I'm okay in going with that direction as I had spoken earlier as well. Can we also, as part of that deferral, refer the comments through, I guess, what's outlined by Councillor Davey, Councillor Chapman, as well as the delegations that spoke today, so that all that information can help to inform regional staff as they kind of come to mind what that final option that they want to recommend.
So I guess my response to that, and staff can correct me if I'm incorrect. I mean, this is a public meeting, and so all of this information is certainly out there and available, and presumably staff can share it. But without any sort of formal votes, it has no official weight as an official position of our council. It would simply be that here's the Councillor Davies' motion, here's Councillor Chapman's motion, and all of these things will be considered on the 8th. Can staff correct me if I'm incorrect in that interpretation, Mr. Donegani?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think certainly it's all public record, would provide the comments, but certainly a motion of council would have much more weight.
My intention is that the only motion of council deal with a deferral. Otherwise, that's okay.
That's fine.
I understand that, Councillor Gazzola, but as I said, this, everything that all of us have said is public record, and regional staff will consider it appropriately, but there will be no official position of the deferral carries.
And I agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So there has been a motion to defer. All those in favor?
Pardon me, recorded vote, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So I'll start with Ward 1, Councillor Davey.
I'm opposed.
Ward 2, Councillor Schneider.
In favor.
Ward 3, Councillor Gazzola.
In favor.
Ward 4, Councillor Michel.
In favor.
Ward 5, Councillor Galloway Seelock.
In favor.
Ward 6, Councillor Singh.
In favor.
Ward 7, Councillor Ioannidis.
Opposed.
Ward 8, Councillor Johnson.
In favor.
Ward 9, Councillor Chapman, sorry. Ward 10, Councillor Marsh.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So the motion to defer carries. And we'll be dealing with this on the 8th. Thank you, Council. And thank you, everyone, for your input and discussion thus far, and to regional staff for joining us earlier today and now. We'll move on now to new business. Regional Council update. I think this probably has been the brunt of the Regional Council update for today, and recognizing that we still have to go back in camera. Questions and answers. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I did have a question from some residents with regards to the storm and the emergency alert or lack of an emergency alert that went out or that did not go out, excuse me, after the storm, or to warn about the storm. And I'm wondering, and I apologize to staff that I did not bring this up earlier to kind of give you a heads up, but I'm wondering if we can make some comments around our preparations around storms, and whether or not there's an opportunity to be sending out alerts ahead of time.
So I'll let Ms. Goldrick respond, but I will note already that I understand Minister Blair has commented on this in the last few days, and there are some questions around how that alert system worked, and sort of a desire to review it. But maybe Ms. Goldrick can give more detail.
Yes, so through the mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Johnston. And as the mayor alluded to, the city is not responsible for the alert that goes out. It is part of a provincial alerting system, and maybe even federal. Maybe Mayor, you may know better about that. But what I do understand, based on feedback that I'm hearing, is that the alert did not go out for this region because it wasn't until the wind speeds were measured at the regional airport that triggered the alert, which then went to other areas of the province. So that's what I understand is as people work through the history of the storm, and when the wind speeds reached the threshold of being over 130 kilometers per hour. I do know there's discussion about what that threshold should be and if that threshold should be lowered. So we're watching those discussions as well. I will say that in terms of the city's response, the city does subscribe to a weather system, notification system that provides information to staff. And just prior to the storm, we did receive a thunderstorm warning. It did not forecast the winds that we received, but it did allow staff to be aware that there was a large system approaching. And then we engaged with staff on call and called staff in immediately. So we are quite proud of the response that we had on the Saturday and calling staff in, but certainly we're looking at the alerting system.
Yeah, thank you. And as a follow-up, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our staff, the incredible work that they put in as a response to the storm. And I'm wondering too, if we can maybe give an update to people. I've been doing this myself, but about how maybe other things will be delayed. Other services, outdoor maintenance services like grass cutting and things are delayed because of the storm cleanup. I'm wondering if maybe we can just do a comment and perhaps some communications around that too, and it's understandable. So thank you.
Thanks. And Ms. McGoldrick, as you respond to Councillor Johnson, perhaps you can also touch on, I know the street by street cleanup that started today, and maybe provide a little more detail as part of that as well.
So we do have, it was all staff on deck over the past week. And so certainly we engaged our roads crews and park staff to do a lot of inspections and cleanup. This week we're starting this systematic cleanup across the whole city on every single street. And we are following the region's waste management schedule to do that, so that the region would do the waste management cleanup, and then the city would go in and clean up the debris. So it doesn't look like we're leaving things at our discretion at the curbside. And so updates are provided on the city's website, and there is an interactive map where residents can go on and see which streets have been addressed. You can also see on the map service requests. So if a resident has called into the city about a tree-related service request, all of those are located on a map, and it is tracking progress. So it's a great communication tool, and I definitely recommend to council, and I think that the link has been shared, and it's also been shared through our social media outlets and on our website from a storm response perspective. So that's a great place to get regular updates. In terms of grass cutting and other seasonal activities, this is a peak time regardless of any other activity happening. And so, you know, any type of rain event that we get, because we've had additional rain events, is difficult in terms of maintaining grass. And so we're seeing typical normal demands at this time of the year for grass cutting, and it takes a little bit longer to get through cycles because of the heavy growth that we experience. That being said, our turf maintenance crews are back on fully resourced in terms of the turf maintenance. So we haven't reallocated turf maintenance staff to forestry cleanup related activities, recognizing how important that service is and the high demand, particularly at this time of the year.
Thank you.
The Ms. McGoldrick, just as, and maybe I missed it when you were saying it, but on the street by street cleanup, we're following the regional trucks, is my understanding correct?
We are following the same cycle as the regional trucks. So it's not necessarily that we're riding in tandem behind them, but we're following the same waste management cycle so that we don't get ahead of the regional cleanup and their normal yard waste pickup, so that it doesn't create confusion in terms of who's picking up what on the streets.
So just for clarity, if a neighborhood typically gets Wednesday yard waste, we wouldn't come on Tuesday. We would come either like Wednesday or Thursday kind of thing.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
We're also just to provide further clarity, we're also prioritizing those areas that have been hardest hit in the city in terms of the amount of debris as well. So that's another factor in terms of the routing of the street cleanup.
Thank you, Ms. McGoldrick. Councillor Ioannidis, you're up next.
Thank you, Mayor Vrbanovic. And yes, Ms. McGoldrick, this is a follow-up question as well. And I'm not sure whether or not this can be answered now or maybe in caucus. I'm just wanting to know what has, I guess, what is our liability with regards to this storm in city trees falling on neighboring properties, the resident properties?
I would suggest that that's a legal question, and one that we can probably get added on to. If you want to move a motion to get some legal advice, that we add that onto the caucus agenda today.
Sure, I would like that.
Okay, I'll take that as a motion. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Johnson.
Through the
Yeah.
Sorry, through the mayor.
Yes.
So if Councillor Ioannidis is raising a motion to go into caucus, that's not currently for a matter that's listed on the agenda. That would involve waiving notice.
Okay, well, it's under question and answers. It would be normal practice if council goes into camera on any issue to deal with it at this time. That's fine. Like, somebody want to waive notice? Councillor Davey, seconder. Councillor Schneider, thank you. Councillor Marsh, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if this is an urgent matter that we have to go into camera and come back, or if we can just add this to the agenda we have an in-camera session after this meeting. So
that's right. My intention is to simply add it to the other one.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Okay, so notice has been waived. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Notice to add this item onto the, motion to add this item on the agenda has been moved and seconded. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Ms. McGoldrick, just one question that I wanted to follow up on is specifically with respect to Rockway Gardens. Rockway Gardens took a major hit. And as council is aware, Rockway Gardens is well looked after for many years by the Kitchener Horticultural Society, but it's done based on an annual agreement with us in terms of those costs. And obviously, this is going to require significant additional operating and capital costs. And so I'm wondering what discussions have already taken place, and if not, can discussions take place and have a report come back to council either by email or to committee in that regard, because it is a gateway park, a much used and loved park. Not that all of the ones around the city aren't, but I think it's important that we deal with it in a timely and effective manner. So, Ms. McGoldrick.
So certainly I can share that Rockway is a high priority park and we provide support into the Horticultural Society cleanup. And so I understand that staff have been there several times already as part of the cleanup, assisting with Rockway staff or with Rockway volunteers and providing support in there. Certainly the scope and the breadth of the damage to Rockway is beyond what we would expect of the Horticultural Society in terms of their operations of the site. So we will continue to do that. I suspect that, and my suggestion is that staff bring forward a report. Overall, likely we won't have the information in June around the overall breadth and scale of damage across the city and the impacts from a financial and urban forestry perspective related to the storm.
And I think the one other, I think getting something to us as soon as possible, as soon as it makes sense, would be helpful so that we can take the necessary corrective action there. And I think the only other thing that would be beneficial to share with council and with the public. My understanding is that the threshold for potential reimbursement from the Provincial Disaster Fund is quite high based on their normal numbers. But there is, in light of the damage across the province, there may be some efforts made to advocate for the province to provide some assistance to municipalities like us and others. Is there, are we proactively tracking those costs and so on? Can you just comment on that?
Absolutely. And so seeing the scale of damage across the province as of Saturday evening, Sunday morning, we created a specific work order project to be able to track all of the costs. All of the costs have been able to be linked and tracked into one project for reporting purposes. So I'm happy to share that we have it will be very easy to provide reporting information to the province should an opportunity present itself.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lautenbach, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, and just to add to the mayor, we've also provided sort of signals to the province that we have incurred significant damage, and so they're aware of that and the type of damage that we've experienced. And given that it is widespread, they are canvassing different areas to get a sort of a survey of what that looks like across communities. So we are hopeful that that may be considered in terms of potential funds that might be available to address any types of claims that we could put forward.
That's wonderful. And I think one of the things we should probably do as part of that is also, while I recognize the hydro utility is a separate entity, we are the primary shareholder, and I do know notionally that the amount of damage has been more than has been seen in the careers of some of our most senior people at Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro. And so we may want to at least be able to factor that in, even though it's not a direct cost of the city, but so that the province is aware of that as well. Okay, thank you. And I would just use this opportunity on behalf of all of council to publicly acknowledge and thank all of our staff from forestry through to call center, through to roads crews, as well as all of the staff at Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro, who literally worked tirelessly throughout the long weekend and in the days after. While we were fortunate to not be in the situation that Ottawa was in, it certainly has been one of the more significant events that I think many people can recall locally, and really appreciate and want to express our thanks to all the staff involved. Okay, moving on then in the agenda, we'll move on excuse me, to the bylaws. First and second reading of the bylaws. Madam Clerk, are there any additional bylaws?
Through the mayor, we do have 4 additional late starters: the OPA and ZBA for 20 Ottawa Street, the development charges bylaw, as well as the business licensing amendment.
Okay, do I have a mover and seconder of the bylaws? Councillor Galloway-Seelock, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Chapman, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted clarification on 14.1.a, just because of the wording, and it might be a bit confusing. Being a bylaw to provide for the establishing and laying out of part of Joseph Street as a public highway in the city of Kitchener. So if staff could just explain exactly what's happening here.
So, okay, right now we're dealing with 11.1.a, but it's the same thing in terms of Joseph Street. We're dealing with first and second reading. Okay. Go ahead, staff.
First reading, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Can someone from staff reply to that? Mr. Reedman?
I'm just trying to look at the bylaw specifically. I wasn't anticipating this question today, and so I'm just trying to find what page it's on.
Yeah, and I did ask the question of staff earlier today. I just wanted it to be, clear to the public, especially those that live in the area, what we mean by a public highway.
And through the chair, I wasn't copied on that, but a public highway is typically a municipal roadway, and so it's not an actual expressway like some people believe, but it's an actual right of way.
Okay.
Can I answer your question, Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's bringing the wording up to what it should be. It doesn't really change anything about Joseph Street as we know it today. So I just wanted that to be said out loud. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I see Ms. McDonald's turned on her Hollywood Square. Ms. McDonald?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I can just confirm that Joseph Street is essentially a public road already. There's just one small little sliver of triangular land near the train corridor that was never opened by bylaw and should be part of the road. And that's what this is. It's just correcting the common use that's been made of it over the years. And so it's a very small sliver, as I said, close to the rail corridor.
Thank you for that added clarification, Ms. McDonald. Thank you for that clarification, Ms. McDonald. So the bylaws have been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It's been moved by Councillor Galloway Seelock that the committee resolve itself into committee of the whole. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Galloway Seelock.
Can I get a mover for the tenders? Moved by Councillor Marsh. Questions of the tenders? Councillor Gazzola?
Yes, on the first tender, there's the tender is 37% higher than what we have budgeted. Is there any explanation from staff on what causes the discrepancy?
Ms. McGoldrick?
So through you, Chair Galloway Seelock, we're seeing significant price escalations on many tenders. And so this is, we were anticipating that this one would likely come in over budget, largely due to what we're experiencing globally in terms of inflation and supply chain risks being factored into the costs of projects, as well as labor shortages. So that's the primary driver. Really from a scope perspective, scope did not change on these. The budgets were originally established in 2019, so prior to the pandemic related impacts and the Russia's war on Ukraine's impacts. And so what we're seeing right now is the inflationary increase that we're experiencing across several projects. And the primary elements that we're finding are seeing significant cost increases are around playground structures. It seems that those material costs have significantly escalated.
So is that going to have any impact on the decisions going forward if we're looking at a 35% increase on things? What will that be taken into account when we're dealing with next year's budget? Or? I hope the answer is yes.
Yeah. So through the chair, yes, and as you saw through the DC bylaw, as we look at the forecasting of capital projects, we are looking at pricing and anticipated pricing. So using new information that we based on new tender information to help cost out future projects. So yes, that will be part of this year's budgeting process, and perhaps Mr. Lautenbach could speak a little bit more about that, but that certainly is the intent.
So through the chair, you'll recall that back in March, we brought forward a temporary supply chain measures report, which outlined a number of pressures that we were facing. One of the things we indicated in that report, and with what Ms. McGoldrick indicated, is that as part of the next year's budget process, we will need to look at the capital forecast to ensure that our budgets are adjusted and aligned with what we're seeing in terms of pricing and the inflation pressures that we're experiencing. So that is part of the plan and will be built into next year's process to right size budgets where needed to make sure that we don't run into these types of scenarios as we move forward.
Apologies, Councillor Galloway Seelock. I realized you were chairing.
That's okay. Councillor Gazzola, are you finished with your questions?
Yeah, I'm finished that. I have a question on the next tender, but I can wait. But
okay, we'll see what Councillor Davies' question is on, if it's on 1 or 2.
I'm on number 2 as well.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola, you want to go ahead?
Well, yeah, I'm concerned about the when we get into situations where there's only one supplier. And I'm just, are we married now to this supplier of street cleaners from here to eternity, or what? Is there nothing that we can do? Are they the only ones that make a sufficient product or not?
So through the chair, yes, these are the only suppliers related to this type of unit, and there's several reasons why the city is interested in the dustless regenerative air sweepers, and a lot of those reasons are mentioned in the report. What I can say is I asked the question in terms of our conventional type of sweepers, the cost differential, and whether we're paying a premium, and I was happy to hear that the price was quite in line with what we would expect to see with a conventional sweeper. But there are so many other environmental and operational benefits associated with this sweeper. So although there is only one supplier of the unit, we were, from a cost perspective, it is comparable, and also it provides us with better lead times in terms of the delivery of the vehicle than a conventional unit. So the thought was the benefits outweighed only having one supplier source.
Thank you.
Councillor Davey, did you have additional questions?
Yeah, actually, that touched upon mine. So just to clarify then, so the cost of the traditional sweepers is close to these far more advanced ones?
That's correct. So there are different types of sweepers that serve different purposes, and it's actually beneficial for us to have different types of the way these units work in order to meet all of the different types of sweeping works that we do, whether it's leaf collection work or conventional street sweeping. And so each of them have their applications, and so we're really happy to diversify our fleet with this. This is our first unit of this type, and so we are quite happy to diversify the fleet given the benefits that this unit derives.
Okay, great. And the other question I have is this: I haven't heard of this type of sweeper before. They've been around for a long time. They're established, reliable.
They are. So through the chair, they are established and reliable. As with any sweeper, they can be mechanically challenging at times, and so we were actually quite pleased with the history in terms of the operational performance on this unit. That being said, the environmental benefits, in terms of the life cycle of sweepers in general, it is a newer type of unit than we would see in a conventional sweeper system.
Okay, well, that's great. It reads like it's basically a mobile air purifier in addition to everything else. So no, I'm happy to hear the prices largely in line. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I don't see any further questions. It's been moved by Councillor Marsh. So all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll now move on to administrative reports. We've dealt with the development charges one, so we can move on to the 2002 resolution of support for the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, board nomination for Mr. Chapman. Does someone want to move that? Moved by Mayor Vrbanovic. Is there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Were there any other items for the committee of the whole? Through the clerk?
Through the chair, no, that's all the items.
Okay, thank you. So it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Michaud that the proceedings and the recorded pecuniary interests and conflicts taken in the meeting of the Committee of the Whole held this date and attached hereto and forming part of these minutes be the same and hereby adopted and confirmed.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Motion for the third readings of the bylaws. Councillor Ioannidis, Councillor Chapman, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And motion to adjourn. Whoops. Motion to, sorry. Need to see you guys. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Michaud, Councillor Schneider. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, everyone. And let's take 5 minutes and come back at 9. I mean, you can stay on the screen, but we'll start caucus at 9:40.